Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
You can all take your seats. We've got a couple extra at the edge there, I think. All right, thank you so much for coming out this evening. My name is Jasper Dent. I'm the events coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory. This is the land of the Cree, Dene, Soto, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis. I'm so pleased to welcome you all to Dave Margoshes' launch of his new book, A Simple Carpenter. A couple quick notes before we begin. There is a webcam. We're live streaming this, so please just be aware of the camera up to your right here and avoid it. Also, I'd like to take this moment to remind you all to silence your phones. There's always one person who forgets. It's very awkward. Okay, and now I will gladly hand over my hosting gig tonight to Bill Robertson. Bill is a retired professor and Saskatoon-based poet, and longtime readers of the Star Phoenix will probably remember him for his many years as a book, music, and theater critic. All right, Bill, take it away.
I'll just stand up to start with till I get tired. Nice to see such a large group here tonight. For the launch of Dave's book. Dave asked if, or somebody asked if I'd introduce Dave. So here he is. This is Dave. Yeah. He just said to me, why don't we have a good time tonight? So I said, well, that sounds like a reasonably good thing to do. So that's what we're going to do. This is Dave's fourth novel. He's also written various collections of short stories and poetry, as you well know. I think it's quite the thing to have this Simple Carpenter novel that we're going to embark upon here. This is the fellow who published a book called A Book of Great Worth. Now that takes a certain kind of cast iron. Anyway, he's got a short story collection, and in it, one of the main characters in the story is a guy named Dave Margoshes. So and now we've got a book in which miracles occur. There's a chap named Jesus. Do the math. It takes place in the Middle East, and various things happen. Like, they cast their nets on the one side, and it's full of fish, and somebody says that was water. No, it's wine. It's wine. And so the guy's got a certain kind of chutzpah, this fella. And so we just worked this out over supper. He said, well, why don't we just do this? I'll read for a little bit, and then you talk to me about the book. And then I'll read for a little bit, and you talk some more. And so I guess that's what we're going to do. We're going to read and talk, sip and chat.
Enough already.
Yeah. So as the great author himself said, shut up. So here's Dave. Dave is going to read now. Okay? Everybody good? Good.
How's this sound?
Good.
Okay. I'm going to jump right in. This takes place on a becalmed ship in the Mediterranean, mid-'80s. This is the way the novel opens. The blood in my veins sang and boiled. The sheets of my bunk were awash with sweat and other foul emanations of my body. I slept and slept, slipping in and out of consciousness. Through the haze of my own mind, I heard voices babbling in a stew of languages, their words clear and indistinct at the same time, their meaning incoherent. I heard the voices of men calling for their mother the way a child would, helpless and completely devoid of bravado. I heard curses aimed at various gods, at poor choices and bad luck. And I heard the plaintive sound of men sobbing. Through that cacophony, one voice eventually distinguished itself and became clear, the voice of the first mate, cutting like the serrated fisherman's knife he wore on his belt. Come on, Carpenter, hold on. This is not this Carpenter. And while everything else was vague and turmoil, suspect, I was certain of two things. I was Carpenter, though whether that was my name or my occupation, I did not know. And I was holding on. I could remember none of the details, but I knew I was on board a ship and had been on it for many months. Knew it because the voice of the first mate told me so. From where the ship had embarked, I could not say, nor what business had occupied me prior to my taking ship. Indeed, my entire life was a page devoid of writing. The likelihood I sensed, even in my feverish fog, was that the men of the ship knew little more of me than I myself remembered, such being the nature of men at sea. And so a third certainty came to me finally, like a light beaming through a fog to guide a puzzled mariner. I might not actually be Carpenter, whoever that poor wretch might be. I was not the only one suffering, that was clear. So how could I be sure it was I who was Carpenter? To go further, I might be anybody, anyone of my own choosing. Who was to say? My memory had all but disappeared. Who I was, where I had come from, my childhood, my loved ones, all of that. Even the most recent events, those of the misadventure that had led me and my fellows to our sick beds, were way beyond my reach. And that's all I will read from chapter 1. What do you got to say for yourself?
Well, that's not a whole hell of a lot to hang on to, right away. But
You know, you got a guy, he's sick, he's lost his memory. What more do you need to know?
okay, Steve. So we jump right in, and we've got a fellow who doesn't even know his name. They call him Carpenter, and as you'll find, I'm not going to ruin things. I'm like, yeah,
No,
they call him Carpenter because he's a carpenter. At least the captain tells him he's a carpenter. And as we go through the novel, we'll find that not only is he a carpenter, he's a pretty good carpenter. Okay, so he's got that. But who is he? He doesn't know. He doesn't know. And for many of us, when we start a novel, we want to pick up things pretty fast. You know, like, who is this? What's going on? And this guy doesn't know. He doesn't know what's going on. So we're, as a reader, we're as at sea as he is. All right.
nice
So
metaphor.
brilliant. Up all night. Anyway, so there he is trying to figure out, well, who am I? And I guess what we're heading into with this novel is, what is the function? Like, does memory play a role in what we do? Now, I would suspect that for many of us it does. You know, who am I? What am I? You know, where do I live? You know, that kind of thing. So I'm having been ambushed quickly, I'm going to turn it right back to Dave and get him to read some more so we can maybe get a little more to talk about.
All right.
Over to you, Dave.
So now I'm jumping ahead to chapter 5. In between, there's a storm and a shipwreck and a harrowing week-long adventure in a lifeboat as one of his fellows after another dies, and then another storm, and he's finally swept ashore on a desert island. Well, it's not exactly a desert island. It's got some trees and a creek, or not a creek, but a pond. Anyway, and some animals. And he's there for 40 days. There were many animals on my island. Surprisingly many, considering how small was the wooded area where most of them lived. Most were small, but a few larger animals, creatures that, like me, hunted and fished, also lived in the woods. One in particular caught my attention. It stood at perhaps calf height and had a long reddish furred body, a flaring tail with a white tip, and a long sharp snout. I've since seen photos of a fox. This animal was similar but considerably larger. It moved gracefully, silently through the woods and along the beach. For the first week or more, I caught only fleeting glimpses of it, or occasionally found what I took to be its footprints in wet sand near the shore, an oval central pad with 4 clawed toes, the whole thing no larger than half my own palm. But as time went on, the creature, I'm sure that there was only one, grew accustomed to me and bolder. As I washed my face or gathered water from the spring, I would become aware of eyes upon me. And raising my head, I would see it sitting on its haunches beneath a tree, calmly observing me. Other times, as I walked through the trees, gathering fruit and firewood, the creature followed me at a respectful distance, its eyes large and luminous. Sometimes at night, as I sat before my fire on the beach, the animal would creep out of the woods and approach, pausing to sit and watch, then zigzag a bit closer still. One night, coming close enough that, had I reached out, I might have touched the ruffled fur of its head. I took comfort from this companionship, so I was disturbed when one day I realized I had not seen this creature for some time. I watched for it, the flash of red out of the corner of my eye, but there was no sign of it, no print on the ground. After many more days, I had to conclude that the beautiful animal was gone. Had it died, swam away, met some other fate? I had no way of knowing. But sometime after that, I began to be aware of another animal, a much larger one. I awoke abruptly at dawn, feeling eyes on me. But when I looked around, there was no one, nothing. Walking to the stream, I heard a rustle in the brush. Again, nothing. That night, just as I was falling asleep, I heard a growl. I sat up, eyes wide, ears open, listening, the hair on the back of my neck bristling. Nothing. Surely my imagination. But then again, a distinct growl, low and rumbling, something I would have recognized as feline if I'd had any knowledge or memory of cats. Something halfway between a warning and a purr. The sound gradually diminished, then was extinguished. I fell into an uneasy sleep, wondering if I was in any danger. Glad that the sharp stick I used for fishing was close at hand. In the morning, I searched the area for tracks, but found nothing. That night, the same thing, the growl coming just as I was drifting into sleep, thrusting me awake. But this time, the sound seemed less threatening. I sat up, listening for a few minutes, and heard it settle into a steady, low drone. I lay back down and fell into a comfortable sleep, filled with vivid dreams. Again in the morning, no tracks or other sign of the visitor. This went on for another night or two. Then I was awoken at dawn by the tide, unusually high, lapping against the soles of my feet. I scrambled up and began to move backward, but something caught my attention, and I waded back into the retreating water. There in the wet sand were prints, much like those of the animal that had visited me earlier, but twice the size. I whirled around, but nothing. Turned again to the prints, but they led nowhere, or rather they seemed to have come from and returned to the sea. Impossible. Shaken, I walked off the beach and into the trees to the stream. I drank and washed my face. When I rose and turned around, the animal was there, sitting on its haunches the way the earlier creature had, calmly observing me. This creature was as large as a man, but configured with 4 legs, long, muscular legs, clad in short, sleek, lustrously brown hair. The paws were adorned with long, sharp-looking claws. The legs supported a barrel-shaped body covered by a tawny, shaggy coat and a massive head with flaring nostrils and an even shaggier mane, and topped by a pair of large curving horns. Having since scoured books containing photographs of various animals, I can say this creature seemed to be an unlikely combination of lion and bull, something akin to the Minotaur of Greek myth. I had never seen anything like it, but I instantly recognized it as having visited me in my dreams. Perhaps it was this familiarity that allowed me, despite the creature's size and evident strength, to feel no apprehension. We gazed at each other for several minutes, and then, to my utter surprise, the creature spoke. What do you think of that?
Wow. He, now that I think of it, he sounds an awful lot like the animal on the cover of the Rolling Stones' Bridges to Babylon album. Kind of a bit of a Sphinx look to him. He's there. I don't think I'm jumping too far ahead. He's there to, he comes to our main character whose name comes wherever he is. He's a kind of a chameleon when it comes to his name. And this creature comes and visits our main character. And he's there to push him to do things, to, well, don't be afraid. I think you'll be okay. Try this. And I by now you know that our man here has survived days in a lifeboat. I'm looking at you, Jan Martel. Straight down the pike at you, boy. And
He was my inspiration.
brilliant. Steal where you can. You've got the Robinson Crusoe story going on here, and there he is. He's with a dose of magic realism going on with these wondrous animals. I wouldn't mind if you tell the folks. You say he lost his memory after he was bitten. Tell us about those bugs, Dave.
Oh yeah. Well, this is in the first chapter. The ship is becalmed, and running out of food and water, and they spot an uncharted island, and so a dory is dropped into the water, and a few men row over to this island, hoping that there will be some fresh water there. Instead, there's just swamps, and they're attacked by a swarm of flies, horrible flies, who mesmerize them with their jewel-like eyes. And they're more like mosquitoes, I guess. They sink their razor-sharp proboscis into their skin and deposit horrible things. And all these men come down with a horrible fever. All of them die, except for Carpenter.
Except our guy.
But he loses his memory. And instead, in exchange for his memory, he gains the ability to speak and understand all languages, which comes in very handy for him later.
A little later in the novel. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I'm giving anything away to the reading public, but those mosquitoes with their jewel-like eyes bear an uncanny resemblance to the mosquitoes with the jewel eyes in a novel you edited once upon a time. Do you recall Rick Hillis's posthumous?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of jumped right out at me, but didn't bite me. Anyway, I think
I plead the fifth.
Yeah.
I had no memory of that.
Well, I'm sorry that I do. I'll try to forget it. Anyway, I think I'm going to get Dave to read a little bit more, and we're starting to get some ideas here. Are you getting an idea what's going on here, folks? I see some people nodding. Other people are, no way, Bill. Okay, not a clue, says the guy who's gonna help us read. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay,
All right.
all right, here we go. Some
So
more read.
40 days on this island, then he's rescued by a fishing vessel. And he's taken to Lebanon, which is nearby. And he winds up in a clinic run by a group of nuns. And he's there for a while, and slowly he recuperates after his ordeal on the island. And finally, he decides to head off on his own into Beirut. Leaving the convent, I caught a bus down the coast and into Beirut. I had heard that it was a city of many nationalities and languages, and I hoped to find some clues to my past there. I entered the city like a child. All I had in my memory were the few days on board the ship before the storm, then the storm itself and the shipwreck, the blur of my days on first the lifeboat and then the island, and the events and lessons of my time at the clinic. I was, as Sister Mark had put it, a blank slate, waiting to be written on. I had replied to her, only half joking, I have to learn again to be a human being. And I had learned much, including the niceties of eating with a knife and fork and spoon and brushing my teeth. I'd learned to button a shirt and tie shoelaces and how to thread a needle, and more importantly, how to talk to people. But I still had so much more to learn. I had never been in a bus or any moving vehicle other than a boat. I had never been to a restaurant or a store, nor had I ever been with a woman, not in the way I'd come to understand, however hazily, that to mean. I hadn't thought specifically of finding a woman in Beirut, but when I entered the city, I was seduced by the sight and aroma of them. During the month or so that I'd lived at the clinic, I'd been in the company of a number of nuns most of the time. But with the exception of Sister Mark, there was nothing sexually attractive about them. And in the case of Sister Mark, I had forced myself to refrain from sexual thoughts. It wasn't until I arrived in Beirut and saw various women on the street, women of all ages and types, skirts and slacks and blouses, that I began to appreciate the power they wielded just by their physical presence. As soon as I got off the bus, I found myself swept up by a need I could neither understand nor put a name to, and no knowledge of how to satisfy it. I took a chance and approached an old man at a market who I thought looked worldly. He laughed and directed me to a nearby district. I followed his directions, and there, in the midst of a warren of stalls selling all manner of food, I stood on a street corner, transfixed by the sight of passing women. And perhaps my desire was so obvious that even a child could see it, for presently a young boy approached me. I looked into the boy's eyes and was shaken by the reflection of myself I saw. Then the boy led me from the street to the rear of a two-story building and up a rickety flight of outside stairs, through its door, through a paint-peeling dark hallway, and then without knocking, through another door and into a dimly lit room. When I saw the woman for the first time, and when she undressed, it was a revelation that left me speechless, breathless, beside myself. I had entered her room as a child and without shame, and I told her as much. She nodded, seemingly unsurprised, and proceeded to instruct me in the art at which she was practiced. It didn't take long, but longer than it might have, as she insisted that I slow down, that I follow her lead, which I was more than content to do. Then, having done what I had dreamed of doing for so long, I lay in a state of stated exhaustion and disbelief. But the woman remained restless. She sat herself beside me, stroking my naked skin, murmuring. Only moments earlier, during the height of our passion, her fingers had caressed my backside, and she had remarked on the raised welts there. Now those fingers, slender and skillful, went to them again. She leaned over me, drawing her face closer. She paused, her fingers hovering above my flesh as a hummingbird might above a blossom. What are those strange markings? She asked. Whereas before, she had spoken only in soft murmurs. Now her words were clear and precise. Not markings, I said, a scratch. That's what the first mate on the ship had said when he'd observed them. Probably the battle scars from an encounter with a woman. That's what the first mate had said. No, the woman said. Not. She paused again. Her fingers traced the outline of the welts. My God. She said it in Arabic, which we had been speaking, then repeated it in Hebrew. It did not occur to me to be surprised that I understood her. A scratch, I repeated. No, the woman said, reverting to Arabic. It's letters, a word, a Hebrew word. I've seen it before. And here she switched again to Hebrew. It's Ruel. It means child of God.
Okay. The prostitute's name is Marianne, but she goes by variations of that name. She turns out to, in the old cliched sense, and Dave minds it for all it's worth, to be the prostitute with the heart of gold, who, finding this extraordinary man who has come into her life, devotes herself to him exclusively, and they form an exclusive bond with each other. Okay, this is after he's been at a convent in which the sisters have come forward and called him Yesu. Okay, this is where he was. And they insist that there's something very extraordinary about this fellow. And in fact, they are determined to make him into a Messiah. And he doesn't want to have any part of that. He says, as he'll say through the novel, I'm a simple carpenter. I'm just a simple carpenter. You may want to cast your mind back to what the fellow did, that Jesus fellow, what he did. And so you get these intersections all the way through the novel of people wanting this character who has no memory, but has this amazing facility with languages given to him by a mosquito with jeweled eyes. A bit of it. So people also say to our man Yusuf, he calls himself at times, wow, that must be some good thing to have no memory. He doesn't quite see it that way. But some of these fellows, rough-hewn as they are, say, sailors all, I believe, they say things like, well, think about it. There's a lot, I've done a lot of bad stuff. And if I didn't have to remember that stuff, I'd be pretty good. I wouldn't have to think about all that sin and things that they've done. And they talk about, well, what about the good things? And as most of us know, when we're lying in bed at night, writhing, it's not the good things. We're not taughting us good. No, such a lot of good things I've done in my life. No. So these chaps all say to him, that must be pretty good. No memory. You don't have to put up with this stuff. So by now we're with a character who, because of his facility with languages, because of no memory, because he honestly doesn't know where he is at any time, and because of the way he looks, he can pass in the Middle East. Here he is in Lebanon right now. He can pass. Arabs talk to him. I go, he's an Arab. He's with some Jewish people. Sure. He switches to Hebrew. And on we go. So And these various people call him in the same way that our prostitute with the heart of gold did, call him by a holy name because of something he has scratched in an unlikely place on his buttocks. Okay, so that's enough for me for now. Let's go back to Dave. Don't have any more sheets, Dave.
Now I want to call my friend David Carpenter up. And he can take your place.
Yeah, he certainly.
So I'm just going to fill you in a little bit on what is happening. He winds up in Lebanon. There's a civil war going on there. As you may know, Lebanon is the only country in the Mideast that has a Christian population as well as a Muslim population. And in the mid-'80s, there's a civil war between the Christians and the Muslims, and Israel gets involved too. So we have Christians and Muslims and Jews. It seemed to me that was an ideal place to situate a novel. Anyway, he has a brief career as an interpreter with the United Nations peacekeeping force. He's trying to keep these warring parties from each other. And he also gets seduced into becoming a messenger for Black September, a Muslim terrorist group. And he gets tired of that, and he leaves Lebanon, goes to Israel, and he has a yearning to see the Sea of Galilee, and he hikes across the Galilean hills. It takes him about a week, and he passes through all sorts of strange towns and villages and meets all sorts of interesting people. And eventually, I'm jumping ahead now, near the end of the novel, he comes to a village that is inhabited by very old people. And Dave's going to help me with the dialogue here. I climbed up the hill and came to a place where I found a group of men sitting beside huts. And eventually to sort of a town square where two men were sitting at a table, and I realized they were playing chess. They both seemed quite elderly. And I approached them. And one of them said,
"Welcome, Yusuf Nagir." "Jesu, is it you?" the other asked.
"Certainly not. What are you talking about?"
"Of course," the first man said. "We've been expecting you."
"How can that be?"
Both men shrugged, crooked grins appearing on their weathered faces. The man who'd spoken to me was completely bald, but had a dirty white beard that flowed down his chest. The second man was beardless, but had a full head of meringue white hair. Both wore yarmulkes. "We know things," the bearded man said. "Something we don't know is how we know."
"But how can that be?"
"Not exactly," the white-haired man said. "We know who people say you are. We know you say no. Who you are, what you are, that we don't know. Only time will tell."
"How much time?"
2,000 years, and we still don't know if the first guy was what he said he was, the bearded man said with another shrug.
2,000 years?
My face must have registered shock. He gestured to a third chair, and I gratefully sat. After a moment, I was able to smile. "The first guy," I repeated. 2,000 years.
Well, I'm confused. I don't get it. What's going on?
"Jesu," the white-haired man said impatiently. "He said he was He said he was the Son of God. He made promises, promises we believe. He waved a hand to indicate himself, his companion, and the larger community. Now I ask you, has sin been eradicated? Suffering? My friend here is impatient, the bearded man said. I'm an optimist. I like to keep my mind open. There's a phrase I like. The jury's still out. Was he a mensch or a schmuck? Like I say, the jury's still out. It is for Jesus and for you too.
Who are you? Who are you people?
You could be the one, the white-haired man said. Again, he was taken aback. Could be, I repeated slowly. How will you know? Like my friend said, time will tell, the bearded man said. It's not what you say, but what you do. We've got our eyes on you, and God will let us know. Well, maybe. The bearded man laughed. Last time he was a little ambiguous.
Ambiguous.
The two men introduced themselves. The white-haired man was Whitey. The bald man was Pinky. He pointed to his pink bald dome. This, they told me, was a straight face, and broke into laughter. Once upon a time, I was Matthew, Pinky said. But after so many years, one gets tired of the same old thing. Whitey nodded. I was John. We're all here, you know, the original 12. Thaddeus, Simon, Andrew, Peter, all but Judas. Mark and Luke, too, some of the time. Paul.
What about Judas? Is he here too? You
Uh,
said not?
No, he's not here. And I have to tell you why. But it's on page 4. A man gets tired, bored, too old and infirm to do much but sit around and wait. Wait to die, I think he said. Some of us longing to die. But as you can see, it isn't happening. God won't let us die. That's what we figured, what he said. But even God can't stop us getting old, our bodies from falling apart.
Why won't God let you die?
Why give up? That's the $64 question, isn't it? Pinky said. We don't know, but we have theories. We're being punished. That was Thomas's bright idea. We all thought he was a genius. Then he died. One of the few of us who have. We figured God rewarded him for his brilliance. Or is punishing him in a different way, Whitey said. For his impertinence. Again, a big smile. Punishing.
Why?
Exactly, Pinky says. Chosen is right. We were the chosen people. Unless we win God's favor, as a few have, we'll live until the true Messiah comes. That's our punishment for believing that nonsense about Jesus, for putting ourselves above God. Jesus was punished too, but then redeemed because of his forgiveness.
This is hard to believe.
Well, maybe he was the chosen one. Maybe he was the Messiah, I think he said. Maybe not. Who can tell? He was punished for believing he was a God. But what son gets along with his father anyway? We're not so sure about Jesus, what he said. We believed in him, but he abandoned us. He doesn't speak to us, nor does God. We call ourselves born-again Jews, he said. Whitey ignored him. For centuries, we've debated the pros and cons, held mock trials, taken turns as prosecutor and defenders, and we're still not sure if he was the true Messiah or a false Messiah, an illusion. I took a minute to absorb all this. And Judas, you said Judas isn't here? Ah, yes, Judas, that backstabber. He was beloved above all by God. He was redeemed. He was the hero of the story after all. No Judas, no betrayal, if that's what it was. No betrayal, no crucifixion. No death, no resurrection. This was part of Thomas's theory too, what he said. Doubting Thomas. But isn't there a contradiction here?
There is a contradiction.
Of course. This is all part of God's maddening plan. You live as long as we have, you get used to it. I got up to leave.
I got up to leave. You stayed there. I got up to
You
leave.
got up to leave. One more thing, Whitey said, something is coming. That much we know. What it is, we don't.
Something, what sort of something?
Something for you, Yusuf Najar, he said. Be careful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Pinky. How much time do we have?
15 minutes.
Oh, we got lots of time.
Ugh.
Let's have a conversation.
Okay. So, that working? Yeah. I'll hold it away. So these two old fellows, Pinky and Whitey, have been waiting 2,000 years, actually. Their bodies keep getting older, but they can't die. And as the saying goes around certain nursing homes, God forgot about me. And but not in this case. God seems to be punishing these fellows. But once again, we get the Messiah and or the chosen one, Jesus. And I want to go back to the convent for just a minute. Well, Yusuf, as he called himself, was on the island. He kept a little journal. It's another one of those miracles that somehow the journal survived the various shipwrecks and overboard and everything else, but he had it wrapped up in a carpenter's apron.
Yeah.
And somehow kept it dry. And he wrote what happened to him on the island. And the nuns took it away from him. And they took a look at it and they thought, oh, look at what we've got here. So they sent it off to Rome, where it was translated by the hierarchy in the Vatican. And they sent back the translation along with the original. And of course, the head won't let him have his journal back. They've basically stolen it from him for safekeeping. But they let him have a look at what they've translated, and it bears very little resemblance to what he actually wrote. The temptations that happened on the island have turned into temptations from just simple encounters. And the beast that met him and was very kind and patient with him has turned into some sort of ravening killer. So you can see that his words are being twisted. And we start to ask ourselves, at least some of us do, say people who are reading the book, is this the same kind of thing that happens to the Gospels? There are different interpretations of what happened in Jesus' life, this simple carpenter. And do we look at things in a different way? If you look at some of our modern theologians, say some of these chaps who are questioning things the way they do, like Marcus Borg and people like that, they take a look at some of these stories from the Bible, and some of them say pure science fiction, but a great story. And poor Yusuf, he's looking at what they've done to his journal, and he said, that isn't it at all. You've changed everything completely. And when he turns water into wine. He says, no, it was just water. Well, it's wine now. You're a miracle worker. When they catch fish, and he says, why don't we try over there? Well, you know what happens. And he says, it's luck. We're lucky. Oh no. So the question I asked as I read this novel was, are we ready for the second coming? And would we recognize him if we met him on the street? You know? Or do we just go, you're some charlatan like all the rest of them? Or do we take him to us with hoops of steel and say, oh, finally, you've got a big mess to clear up, buddy. You know, we've been waiting 2,000 years like these poor chaps, Pinky and Whitey. And I notice as well, Dave's got him running errands for Black September. There are moments that Dave lets you work out for yourself. Well, some of you won't be happy to hear that. You know, you want it all tied up. I know you. And he has these villages, and once again with the magic, he goes into these villages, and here's a village where none of the boys get to be older than 13 years old. You know, terrorism metaphor, David. I think. Anyway, so I think we'll leave it there. Is there anything else?
Can I get a word in edgewise?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, go for it, please.
Well, in conclusion, there's a lot of stuff going on in this novel, including a plot to assassinate Queen Elizabeth, which I won't elaborate on. But you know, I describe this novel as part magic realism and part thriller. And the plot to assassinate the Queen is the thriller part. But mostly it seems to keep coming back to religion. And there's a lot of Jews and Christians and Muslims in this novel. And it was my hope that I would offend some people. But I'm really disappointed. My friend Father Demetrius is here, and he doesn't appear to be offended at all. So I guess I'll have to try harder next time. It's really great to have such a nice crowd. So many faces and so many friendly ones, so many people I know. And I have some thank yous I have to make. Thank you to McNally Robinson for allowing me into their hallowed space. And thank you to my wonderful publisher, Radiant Press in Regina, John Kennedy and Deborah Bell. And thank you to my very sharp-eyed editor, Susan Musgrave, who helped me get a handle on some things. And thank you to my colleagues, Guy Vanderhaeghe and Sharon Butala, for their very generous comments, which you'll find on the back of the book. And thank you to my wonderful partner, Dee, who keeps me going. And thank you all for coming. If anybody has any questions, Bill will be happy to answer them.
Big and stand. I can take the microphone out to anyone who would like to ask Dave a question. Anybody got a question?
I've got a question.
Well, not you. You've already.
The book is also full of amazing allusions to other great books, other literature, and the book that it seems to resonate with the most is the Old Testament and the New Testament. In fact, there's all kinds of parallels. 40 days in the wilderness. I could go on, but I won't. Did you have to go back and read parts of the Bible before you wrote this novel? It sounds like you did.
No, first I wrote a first draft. Then I reread the Old Testament
Okay.
and made some changes.
To the Old Testament?
Yeah.
I needed it too. Anybody else have a question? Questions out there? Oh, there we are.
Okay, you said that you wanted to offend some people. What were you hoping? Like, whom did you want to offend?
Well, I was being a little facetious. I expected that I expected that this book might offend some people who are devout Christians or devout Muslims or devout Jews. But hopefully that won't happen. Because they'll just be swept up by the majesty of the prose and they won't notice the offending parts. I certainly didn't mean to offend anybody.
Anyone else?
You must have been very close to the finish of the book on October the 6th, when in the part of the world that I gather you're writing about here, involving a number of the religion and religious people you're writing about, where all hell is breaking loose and people are actually dying, not just arguing about religion and everything. Did that sort of overtake you, or would you have written it any differently,
No,
knowing what's been going on?
no, not at all. The book was not almost done at that point. The book was done. I don't think it was at the printers yet, but it was on its way. It had certainly been through editing, and there was no reason to make any changes to it. All of a sudden, the novel became timely. But to my way of thinking, it would have been timely at any point during the last 2,000 years.
Anyone else? No.
David, as somebody who's trying to still hang on to being a Christian, and by thinking about the original times, I have heard more than once Father Ron Rolheiser, who's quite a remarkable theologian now, and he said we should all read Chris Weiss first, and that writer talks about the virgin birth, and many of the things that have been adopted have been in religion or many years, thousands of years ago, so that we need to be thinking in metaphors about everything that's being taught or practiced.
I agree completely. And I guess I would be pleased if people reading my novel saw all the metaphors in it.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks, Dave.
Is that it?
I guess we're just about done.
I guess we're done. I'll just say, since I don't have a book on the table here, but this guy does, please come on up and buy his book and he'll sign it for you. There's a total shilling on your part there. And I guess that's it. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much.